Hello viewers, welcome back to Daily Fun TV. Today we will talk about the crisis of Ukraine. Let's start. Conflict background. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine became an independent country in 1991. The war between Ukraine and Russia began in 2014 after the people of Ukraine elected a new president, Petro Poroshenko. This was not accepted by Russia, which understand Ukraine as its own territory. In response to the election, Russian troops invaded Ukraine and took control of Crimea. The Ukrainian military fought back, but they were no match for the Russian forces. After that, the war has been initiated on and off. Ukraine has recovered control of some of its territory, but Russia still holds Crimea. Deaths of thousands of people, both soldiers and civilians, seem due to fighting. Also, many more people have been displaced from their homes as a result of the conflict. Ukraine was working to forge closer ties with the European Union and with NATO, which escalated the tensions with Russia. Start of 2021, Russia built up a large military presence near its border with Ukraine and within neighboring Belarus. Russian officials constantly denied plans to attack Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized the enlargement of NATO and demanded that Ukraine be barred from ever joining the military alliance. After 8 years, the conflict in Ukraine escalated into a war on the 24th of February 2022. Bombs and shelling continue, which destroy and damaging homes, hospitals, schools and other civilian infrastructure. The war in Ukraine continues to have devastating consequences for the civilian population as humanitarian needs are on the rise. Millions of people have been relocated from their homes in Ukraine and are in need of humanitarian support. It has become the largest and fastest displacement crisis in Europe since World War II. About 5.4 million people are displaced inside Ukraine, while more than 8 million people have escaped to neighboring countries as refugees, while millions more are evacuated within Ukraine and in need of urgent humanitarian help. Many are stranded or unable to leave Ukraine due to destruction of bridges, roads, increasing violence and a lack of resources or information on where to find safe accommodation. Strategic location of Ukraine. Russia wants to control Ukraine due to its important strategic location. It is located between Russia and Europe, which means that whoever controls Ukraine can exercise a lot of power. Also, Russia has long considered Ukraine to be its own territory and it doesn't want to see it become part of the European Union. Ukraine is also home to a lot of Russian speakers, which Russia sees as another reason to control the country. Main humanitarian challenges. Russia's war on Ukraine has resulted in humanitarian suffering on a scale beyond what Europe has seen this century. The world is witness to the deaths of innocent civilians, the destruction of main infrastructure and massive displacement within Ukraine and outside. Due to continued attacks, public who remain in Ukraine are enduring the dangers of life under siege, as they try to manage without adequate water, heat and electricity. Ukraine's cold winter months intensified humanitarian needs in the country as families tried to keep warm without access to heating while temperatures regularly dropped below freezing. Meanwhile, constant shelling hindered access to food and medical support. The majority of those on the move are female and children, who are always most at risk of exploitation and abuse during crises. This war has deteriorated Ukraine's infrastructure and sent the country's economy into drastic decline. Hospitals and ambulances have been attacked, with damages to the health sector estimated more than $2.5 billion and increasing. If the crisis continues, then essential services may shut down. Millions of people are struggling with war-compounded trauma without adequate mental health support available. Refugee crisis. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has resulted in one of the world's largest refugee crises, and the war continues to force people in. Most of them are women, girls and the elderly. This war forced them to flee across borders to Poland, Moldova and other European states. Women and girls, especially those traveling alone, could be at risk of exploitation and abuse, including sexual violence, gender-based violence and trafficking. Education crisis. According to UNICEF, the war has affected education for more than 5 million children. The UNICEF Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia, Afshan Khan, said that schools and early childhood education settings provide a crucial sense of structure and safety to children, and missing out on learning could have lifelong consequences. Power crisis. Approximately 9 million Ukrainians are living without electric power. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that power shortages is due to the result of Russia's missile strikes targeting Ukraine's power grid, with nearly 9 million people remaining without electricity. The World Health Organization's WHO Regional Director for Europe, Hans Kluge, had previously warned in November 2022 that the Ukraine is facing its darkest days in the war so far after news that half of Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed by Russian missile attacks. Sexual violence. Sexual violence is being used as a weapon of war. In war, women's bodies often become the battleground on which conflict is fought. According to the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, rape and sexual abuse are not just a byproduct of war but are often used as a deliberate military strategy, that being used by the armed forces of Russia. Most vulnerable. UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell, calling for an end to the attacks on vital infrastructure, said that to attack the most vulnerable babies, children, pregnant women and those already suffering from illness and disease, and health workers risking their own lives to save lives is an act of unconscionable cruelty. Food crisis of other countries. This war will also have far-reaching humanitarian consequences across Europe and the globe, destabilizing the continent, and damaging the resources of Ukraine's neighbors. It also impacts supplies of Ukrainian-grown wheat and other food staples for countries like Yemen, Libya and Lebanon that are already facing severe levels of food insecurity. Important facts. In 2023, 17.6 million people in Ukraine require humanitarian assistance, 45% of whom are women, 23% are children and 15% are people with disabilities. As of August 13, 2023, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, reported 26,384 civilian casualties in the country, including 9,444 killed and 16,940 injured. OHCHR said the actual figures are considerably higher, and most of the civilian casualties recorded were caused by the use of explosive weapons with a wide impact area. More than 5.82 million refugees from Ukraine were recorded across Europe on the 23rd of August 2023, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. There are an approximately 5.08 million IDPs in Ukraine on the 13th of June 2023. This represents a reduction compared to the 5.4 million as of the 23rd of January 2023. Since August 2022, the number of IDPs has been on a downward trend. The World Health Organization, WHO, verified 1,129 attacks on healthcare in Ukraine, resulting in 104 deaths and 151 injuries in between the 24th of February 2022 and the 23rd of August 2023. According to Ukrainian authorities, in February 2023, the areas contaminated with mines and explosives had increased tenfold since the start of the war, with an estimated 30% of the country's territory contaminated by mines. Humanitarian partners reached nearly 6 million people with multi-purpose cash assistance, MPCA, in 2022. More than $1.2 billion was provided to people impacted by the war in Ukraine. It was the fastest and largest cash programming scale-up in humanitarian history. The Rapid Damage and Needs Assessment released on the 23rd of March 2023 by Ukraine's government, the World Bank Group, the European Commission and the UN estimates that the cost of reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine had grown to $411 billion, 2.6 times the country's estimated 2022 GDP. Conclusion on Ukraine war. Technically, Russia and Ukraine are still at war. They are fighting actively in different areas of Ukraine. In 2015, Russia and Ukraine signed the Minsk II agreement to resolve the issues and end the conflict, but the agreements will never follow and implement in true zeal and zest. The situation on the ground is critical and Russian forces has advantage on Ukraine troops. So, it is very hard to say what will be the end of this war and what will happen in the future. War brings immense sorrow and destruction. It hurts not only soldiers but also innocent people and their communities. The lessons from war teach us to do everything possible to avoid it. Finding peaceful solutions through talking and understanding is vital. While some wars might seem necessary to protect, the terrible consequences remind us that war should be avoided if possible. In our history, wars have caused suffering, economic problems, and long-lasting pain. It's better to focus on solutions that don't involve violence. Diplomacy and working together can solve problems without the heavy costs of war. The global community, shown by groups like the United Nations, tries to prevent wars and promote peace. This is important because rebuilding after war is hard and takes a lot of time and effort. In the end, the goal is to create a world where people from different places and backgrounds can live without fear of war. This means understanding each other, talking through issues, and finding common ground. The true progress of humanity comes when we can avoid the tragedies of war and build a future based on cooperation and empathy. That's all for today. See you in the next video.